The edge of the forest lay brittle and hushed, a place where the undergrowth thinned and the dust from the nearby trail curled against dry roots. Branches hung low with the weight of old heat, and the leaves beneath them lay flattened, bleached by the sun. The wind, when it passed, was more suggestion than force, rustling just enough to lift the top layer of detritus before letting it fall again. That was when he heard it. Not a bird call, not the cry of any wild animal, just a sound, thin, raspy, barely there. It came again, spaced by long stillness, like something had tried to cry out and then thought better of it. He stopped where the dirt sloped into old run-off channels and listened, turning slightly toward a clutch of fallen branches near the base of a eucalyptus tree. Nothing moved, but the sound came again, from within. He stepped off the path, boots sinking into the soft mold of shed bark and leaf. The brush had grown wild here, but not impassable. He bent low, parted a curtain of limbs and paused. Beneath a tangle of deadwood and dust, half covered by an old palm frond, a small shape lay curled in on itself. It did not rise, it did not lift its head, but its ribs fluttered. It was a puppy. Its fur was the color of riverbank clay, muddied and patchy in places where skin showed through. A tail twitched once, then stilled. The paws were folded unnaturally, as if the legs had stopped listening some time ago. Its body barely shifted with each breath, as if air had to fight its way through. Dried blood darkened one ear. Around its snout, flies circled and returned. The sound had stopped now. Even the whimper had taken too much. The man crouched slowly, no movement, no bark, no lunge, just silence. He didn't speak at first, just knelt and reached gently to touch the edge of a branch, then another, moving them away without noise. The pup didn't flinch. A light hand met the side of the belly, hot in patches, cold in others. Dehydration, shock, hunger, all of it. A full breath passed before the pup blinked. Its eyes didn't open all the way, and when they did, they didn't focus. But there was a shift, a tightening in the neck muscles, a tremble through the spine that spoke more than any cry. The man knew that kind of effort, not pain but persistence, the kind that stayed long after everything else had been lost. He took off his scarf and slid it beneath the pup like a sling. The body was lighter than expected. Ribs rose once, sharply, as if startled by the movement, but then settled. As he lifted, one paw dangled, limp, the pad dry and cracked. The head lolled, but there was no resistance. He moved back through the trees, careful not to jar the weight in his arms. Each step brought them closer to the edge of the forest, where the trees broke into open field. A stone wall lined the boundary, and just beyond it, a narrow path curved toward an old cabin he used on survey nights. The light had begun to shift by then. The sun, no longer overhead, painted gold along the tips of dry brush and lit the curve of dust that followed behind his steps. Cicadas buzzed from the shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped. But here, close to the body he carried, it was quiet. At the cabin's edge, he spread a wool blanket beneath the shade of the overhang and laid the pup gently down. It didn't move, didn't adjust its weight. The eyes stayed half-lidded. He filled a shallow bowl with water and set it nearby, then placed one soaked finger at the side of the mouth. It took time, just a twitch at first. Then a slow draw of the tongue, dry and unsure. The man sat beside it, knees bent, arms resting loosely across them. He didn't touch again, just watched. In the stillness, the pup's sides moved faintly. That small breath of effort had returned, but only just. Later, as dusk leaned in and turned the treetops violet, the pup stirred. Not fully, just a tilt of the ear, a flinch of the paw, the kind of movement that felt unintentional, like something in the muscles had remembered what it used to do. The man watched the leg spasm once, try to press downward, then fall again. He whispered only once, because anything louder felt too sharp for this place. "You're not alone now." The pup didn't answer, but the next breath came slightly deeper. By the time night settled, and the wind had stilled again, the leaves no longer rustled, the fire in the old stove gave off a slow heat, and outside, beneath the overhang, the pup lay curled where he'd been placed, ribcage rising in the rhythm of sleep, too tired to dream. Somewhere in the quiet, the man wrapped his coat tighter and stayed near. Not every rescue starts with a bark or a call. Some begin with silence, a silence too heavy for the forest to hold on its own. The night passed without movement. The pup beneath the overhang remained still, breathing shallow and slow. Each hour brought a dimming of pain, but not return. In the quiet dark, the man kept vigil, leaving only once to refill the bowl with clean water, each step measured to not disturb whatever fragile rhythm had settled in the small body wrapped in wool. By morning, the air had cooled. Mist clung to the bark of the trees, and dew slicked the stones lining the path. Birds began again, their calls hesitant, as if checking the silence hadn't thickened overnight. The man rose with the light, stepped outside, and checked the pup. No movement. Then as he knelt, a small sound stirred. Not from the body before him, but farther off, a scrape. It came again, a faint dragging against wood, followed by the briefest chuff of air. The man turned toward the forest's edge, and there, just beyond the thinning trees, stood another dog. Older, ribs visible, but less severe, ears slack, fur mottled with dirt and pine needles. A father, though the man hadn't seen him before. He stood not as if startled, but waiting. The same hoarse patience the first pup had shown was in him too. When the man took a step forward, the dog didn't run. He backed up slowly, turned, and walked into the trees. The man followed. They wound through the forest floor, dry leaves breaking gently beneath boots and paw. The dog didn't look back. His gait was slow, as if not leading, but guiding. Every few yards he'd pause at a bend, check the space behind him, then continue. The trail led past a fallen fence post beyond an overgrown path, and toward what had once been a small outbuilding, perhaps for tools or feed, long abandoned. The roof sagged, like it had folded in on itself during one storm too many. Planks along the side had come loose and leaned like shuttered wings. Near the base, boards had broken away entirely, leaving an opening near the ground. The dog stepped through. The man crouched low, angled his head beneath the gap, and froze. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust. Inside, where dirt had pooled into soft hollow beneath the structure, 5 tiny shapes pressed close to one another in a nest of shredded leaves and rotting cloth. Pups, not more than a week or 2 old. Their eyes were closed, their ribs soft arches beneath thin skin. One lifted its head weakly, as if drawn by his scent. It wobbled once, then lowered it again against a sibling's flank. The dog stood watch behind them, not touching, not whimpering, just present. His face carried no expression. But in his stillness was something the man recognized. Urgency, quiet, deep. He hadn't brought the man here to witness. He'd brought him because there was no one else. The pups didn't cry, not truly. They made the faint sounds of hunger, of confusion, barely audible mewls that died quickly in the air. Their limbs twitched with the effort of motion. Their bellies rose shallowly. One had a wound along its leg, another bore a scabbed cut above its eye, but all breathed. The man removed his jacket and laid it open along the outer edge. He reached forward, one hand at a time, into the space beneath the floor. His voice came low, barely above breath. "Easy now." One pup stirred under his touch. Another whimpered, not from fear, but frailty. He moved slowly, drawing them out 2 by 2, until the fifth, a smaller one with a crooked tail, remained. This one resisted. Its paw clawed once at the dirt, not from strength, but instinct. The man scooped it gently, cradling the curve of its spine. It made no further sound. Outside, he wrapped them together in the jacket's fold, tucking the cloth so their heads could rise. The father stepped out behind him, nose touching the side of each pup as if counting. When he reached the last, he paused, then lowered his head. The walk back was slower. The man carried the jacket like a sling against his chest, careful not to jostle. The father followed closely now, not leading, not trailing. A quiet shadow beside the sound of his own pup's breathing. At the cabin, he cleared space near the hearth, a folded blanket, a soft crate he'd kept in the shed. He lined it with shirts, warmed a shallow bowl of goat's milk, and soaked the edge of a cloth. One by one he dabbed each mouth. Some responded, others barely moved, but when he set them down, they nestled into the cloth without protest. The father lay beside them, long body curved into a crescent, chin resting near their backs. He made no sound, only watched. Evening came slow. The man lit a lantern but kept it low. One pup lifted its head near midnight, then rested again. The father didn't sleep. Outside, wind swept gently across the leaves. The forest, once holding its breath, seemed to exhale. And inside, under the broken floor no longer, 6 lives had been lifted from the dark. Not whole, not healed, but here. And that was enough for now. The days that followed did not come with changes that could be measured in leaps or strides. There were no sudden recoveries, no bursts of energy. What arrived instead was a rhythm, a slow, careful pattern woven between instinct and trust. At first, the father dog kept to the edges. After the pups were moved into the cabin and the crate filled with warm cloth and scent, he had lingered outside beneath the overhang, resting in a curve of shadow near the door. The man left the entrance ajar, that was all. He didn't coax, didn't call. By nightfall, the dog had stepped inside on his own and lain near the hearth, silent. At dusk the next day, he left. It was quiet, so quiet the man didn't hear the movement until the wind shifted and the door creaked faintly. He stepped out and saw only paw prints in the soft earth. The man said nothing, only watched the woods where the trail turned faint among the trees. There was no sound from the pups. They were sleeping then, breathing shallow but steadier. An hour later, the dog returned, mouth full. He carried scraps, part of a discarded sandwich, a bone, something unrecognizable but dragged with care. He dropped them near the crate, stepped back, and sat. Not as one expecting praise, but as one fulfilling a duty. When the man reached forward to remove the spoiled pieces, the dog did not interfere. He simply watched. This happened again the next evening. By now the pup stirred more frequently. Small sounds, soft squeaks and whimpers, rose in the quiet room, particularly when the wind shifted or light changed. Their limbs kicked sometimes in sleep, and one had begun rooting gently against the side of the crate, searching for warmth that wasn't there. The man soaked more cloth in milk, dripping it slowly at the edge of their mouths. Some took it. One still didn't. The father brought things again. This time a wad of leaves, a crushed apple, a dead lizard, offerings not suited for human care but offered all the same. Each time the dog dropped them, then stepped aside, watching, waiting. It became clear then This was not abandonment. This was not retreat. This was a father who had done all he could in the wild, fed what he could, guarded when he had strength, and now brought what he could find to those who could carry more. He did not leave his pups. He had delivered them. The man shifted his routine to match. At sunrise, he warmed milk, crushed small bits of boiled egg, laid damp cloth for licking. He changed the bedding when it soured. He cleaned the small bodies gently with a soft brush. The dog stayed near, watching every movement. When one pup squeaked too sharply, the dog stood. When they settled, he lay back down. On the fourth day, the smallest pup, crooked tail, thin back, refused the dropper. It turned its head away again and again. The man adjusted his approach, dribbling a bit along the lower lip. A tongue flicked, barely. The father crept closer, lay beside the crate and nudged gently with his nose. The pup didn't respond. The man whispered, almost to himself, "Come on now, just a little more." The pup stirred, licked once, then twice. The dropper emptied. That night, the man let the fire burn low. The dog stayed curled beside the crate, his breath close to theirs. The air inside the cabin warmed slowly, pressing back the sharp chill that had crept in after sundown. Beyond the walls, the trees swayed. A night bird called once and was answered from deeper in the woods. In the early hours, the man woke to a new sound. Not distress, not panic, just a low, steady whine. The father dog stood, alert, tail down but not tucked. He moved toward the door and waited. The man followed, pulling it open slowly. The dog stepped out and looked to the trees. A rustle. Then silence. Then again a brief shudder through the brush, too low for wind. But nothing emerged. The dog didn't bark. He didn't advance, just waited, eyes fixed. After a few minutes, he turned back, satisfied. The man watched him re-enter, circle once beside the crate, and settle again. This was his post, and the forest had learned it. Morning came soft. The sun filtered in slow bands across the wooden floor, warming the tips of small ears and the fine edge of a paw. One pup stretched in its sleep. Another opened its mouth in a silent yawn. They weren't healed, not yet, but they were changing. The man rose, tended the crate, then filled a bowl with soaked kibble and left it for the father. This time the dog ate, not quickly, not hungrily, just enough. And as the light rose higher and the shadows shifted, the man sat again on the floor beside the crate. The dog lay across from him. Between them, a space filled not with noise but with breath and presence. In that quiet, there was nothing more to ask. Just the steady rhythm of survival shared between a man who had stayed and a father who had waited. By the sixth morning, the change in the air was nearly imperceptible, warmer, quieter, softened by the weight of something not quite hope, but close. The pups stirred more regularly now, stretching their legs, mewling with faint hunger. Their eyes had not yet opened, but their bodies no longer lay so still. The man decided it was time to move them. The crate had served its purpose, but the space was narrow, and the cloths, though changed daily, had begun to hold the sour scent of slow healing. He set about preparing a new bed near the hearth, wider, flatter, lined with washed blankets, and the outer lining of an old coat. The father dog watched quietly from the doorway as the man made space. One by one, the pups were lifted, slowly, gently. Their bodies no longer flinched at touch. The smallest whimpered faintly and kicked as he was placed into the new nest. The others curled instinctively against one another. Warmth pooled quickly beneath them. The man turned to reach for the last cloth when he noticed the father was no longer in the room. He looked to the open door. Beyond it, the morning light hung low through the trees. The air smelled of wet bark and old pollen. The man stepped out and scanned the yard. Movement caught his eye. Just past the corner of the old shed, where the boards still leaned and sagged into the earth, the father dog emerged. He carried something in his mouth, small, wrapped in what looked like a torn strip of cloth. His steps were measured, almost reverent. He did not run. He did not pause. He walked straight toward the cabin. The man stepped aside. The dog entered, crossed the room, and lowered the bundle gently into the nest beside the pups. Then he stepped back. The cloth stirred. It was not a puppy. Tiny, smaller than any of the others, a kitten curled tight into itself. Its fur was streaked with soot and dust, its limbs tucked in too close as if still expecting the squeeze of a collapsed space. Eyes barely opened, clouded. It did not cry, just trembled. The man crouched low, stunned by the fragility of it. He reached a hand slowly to nudge the edge of the cloth away, revealing the kitten's narrow ribs, the faint rise and fall of its chest. The pups shifted. One nosed the newcomer gently, another pressed a paw against its side. The kitten flinched, then leaned in. In seconds its body sank into the curve of fur and warmth. The movement was not seamless, but it was accepted. The man sat back, watching. The father dog stepped forward again. He lowered his head, touched his nose to the kitten's back, then moved to each pup in turn. No sound, just contact, soft and deliberate. The silence in the room changed. It became whole. Later, as the sun rose higher, the man returned to the old shed. He stepped over the boards, ducked beneath a leaning beam, and searched. In the far corner, hidden beneath the collapsed eave, he found the space, small, shielded by a scatter of debris. There, embedded in the dirt, lay faint tracks, tiny paw prints, not many, just enough to mark where something else had once curled. He understood now. The dog had not forgotten anyone. Back at the cabin, the nest breathed. 6 small bodies now pressed together in a circle of quiet pulse and rising warmth. The kitten lay between the smallest pup and the one with the crooked tail. It did not mewl, it did not move much, but its body had stopped trembling. The father dog took his place nearby, closer than before, as if the final piece had made the space real. The man brought a shallow dish and warmed a mixture of milk and egg yolk, soaked a strip of cloth, and placed it near the kitten's mouth. The response was delayed. One flick of the tongue, then another, not enough to nourish, but enough to try. The pups began to stir more regularly by evening. One pushed its head over the others. The kitten stayed low, nestled deep, but its sides moved evenly, breath after breath. That night, the father stayed closest. He didn't leave at dusk, didn't retreat to the edge of the porch. He lay beside the nest with his body curled forward, forming a crescent around the young. The man lit no fire. The heat of 6 bodies and one waiting guardian was enough. Outside, the wind rose briefly and stirred the trees, but inside, everything held still. The 6th had come, not called, not cried, not demanded, only trembled into view, carried by one who had not forgotten. And somehow, without anyone speaking a word, the others had made room. The week passed in slow, quiet increments. No dramatic milestones marked the days, just the gradual return of movement, the soft rise of noise where silence had lived too long. The pup's eyes began to open. First one, startled by the light and closing again quickly, then another blinking at the dull gold of the hearth's morning glow. Their legs found strength next. Wobbly, crooked steps gave way to small, clumsy wanderings inside the nest. They fell more than they walked, their bodies still unsure of balance. But each tumble came with a new rise, a new press of paw against soft blanket. The kitten remained quieter, always smaller, always slower. But its breathing had evened. Its limbs twitched with dreams, and once, just once, it raised its head and pushed gently into the side of the crooked-tailed pup, who didn't move away. The father dog watched all of this without ceremony. He cleaned them when needed, nudged them gently when they drifted too far, and remained near but never intrusive. He ate when food was placed and drank only after the pups had nursed from soaked cloths and lapped the shallow bowl dry. By the 7th day, the man began to prepare the transition. The cabin had been sanctuary, but it was not built for what was to come. Down the field, near the old orchard, was a converted shelter space, a sturdier outbuilding once used by rangers, insulated and repaired, now empty, save for a few stored supplies. He cleaned it, lined the floor with thick padding, brought in soft bedding, and set water and food dishes near the low threshold. The day they moved came with a sky half-clouded, the light cool and even. The air smelled of rain that had not yet fallen. The pups had begun following sound with their heads now, noses twitching at movement. They no longer startled at the man's presence. When he lifted them one at a time, to place them in the cloth-lined basket, they settled quickly, crowding against each other. The kitten was last. The man paused, but before he reached into the crate, the father dog stepped forward. He nudged the kitten with his nose, then curled beside it. With careful movement, the kitten was lifted and placed between the curve of his shoulder and neck. The dog stood, adjusted slightly, and the kitten pressed close, hidden by fur. No words were needed. They walked together through the open field, the man carrying the basket, the dog just behind. The grasses, dry and bent with wind, parted gently as they passed. No birds called, no trees creaked, just the soft rhythm of footsteps and the quiet rustle of fur against earth. At the field's edge, the dog paused, his head lifted. He looked once back toward the tree line from which he had first emerged, as if checking some thread he had not yet cut. The man stopped too. They stood there, without signal, without exchange. Then the dog turned, and they continued. The new shelter smelled of cedar and dust. It was warmer than expected, the roof holding sunlight even in afternoon. The pups were placed into their new nest, the edges tucked and thick with warmth. One rolled over and squeaked, another climbed halfway onto a sibling's back and fell asleep there. The kitten was last to be set down. The father dog placed it gently beside the others, then sat, watching. The man stepped back, watched with him. Later, when he returned to the cabin, he did so alone. The dog remained with the nest, his head lowered, his eyes half closed, but always watching. That night, as dusk filtered across the windows, the man sat at the cabin's table and wrote a short line in the back of a field ledger. Just 7 words. Nothing more. He saved 6 and waited with them. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees again. The door creaked once, then stilled, and far beyond, past the orchard, and down the rise, 6 young bodies slept pressed together in warmth that hadn't existed the week before. Not every rescue comes with lights or loud relief. Some are carried in silence, walked across fields, and left in places where the wild things still remember to wait. And sometimes that is enough.